Hey, welcome back. For the next couple of segments, we're going to take a look at some legal issues that have popped up due to the COVID outbreak, and they run the gamut. Let's start by introducing our panel first, though, via Zoom, of course, from the comfort of their homes. Starting at the very top, James Kousouros, criminal defense attorney in Manhattan, sitting on the board of directors of the New York City Criminal Bar Association. He also frequently lectures at New York Law School and the bar associations in Queens and New York City. Doug Von Oiste, he's a founding partner of Carson Von Oiste. He also focuses on corporate misconduct and was selected by the Legal 500 as one of the influential trial lawyers in our nation. Mayo Bartlett, an attorney at the law offices of Mayo Bartlett PLC and a former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office. Gentlemen, and I use that term loosely, thank you for the time. All right, I want to start off first with businesses that are preparing to reopen, and they're doing the math to determine whether or not they can even afford to get back to work here, besides dealing with the restrictions on the number of customers, people too scared to shop or eat out, and things like that. They're also worried about getting buried with lawsuits. Industry groups representing restaurants, retail stores, hotels, airlines, and more, they're lobbying Congress to provide a liability shield. They say even with precautions taken, they can't guarantee that customers or employees will not get sick. Adding to the concerns, how do you tell how and when somebody actually caught COVID? And Doug, I start with you because you got McConnell saying, listen, this next stimulus bill, it won't even get off the ground unless we build in these liability shields for all these industries. As I did off the top of the show, I am no fan of Mitch McConnell, but do these businesses have a point, which is to say, how can we open our doors here with such a contagious virus? And even if we take the precautions, if somebody gets it, how do we not risk getting shut down and shut down for good as a consequence?
Well, Rich, this is just tort reform again. You see tort reform over and over and over again. Listen, if you're talking about a lawsuit, first off, when it comes to employees, there are workers' compensation laws that they'll have to deal with. But let's assume for a minute you're talking about people suing an establishment because they get sick from coronavirus. Listen, you still have to prove that there's a duty, that the employer or the establishment was somehow negligent, and as a result of their negligence, these people got sick. These would be lawsuits. What they're doing now is talking about is tort reform. They constantly talk about tort reform. And I think you're going to hear more and more about this, and it's going to further after this. We're going to talk about it when eventually there's a vaccine. Tort reform is always present, and it's something they'll always seize upon.
But the argument's going to be, oh, okay, I hear you, but even if the person's got to prove, and it's hard to prove where you got it from, it's going to bury the company here in legal expenses, et cetera. Sometimes people settle just to make it go away. Is it an undue burden given, nobody knows often where it comes from? It's not that clear a line as to you can trace it back exactly where it came from. The companies, at least in the interim, will be held to this kind of scrutiny.
Well, Rich, this is something we deal with in cases constantly. You have to deal proximate cause. You have to deal with negligence, proximate cause. If you think that a jury is just going to give away money to people, it doesn't work that way. Juries are very sensitive to awarding damages for people that don't deserve it. If you're talking about undue burden, the question you're asking really, it presumes the fact that a lawsuit is in some way free money. I mean, if somebody injures somebody through negligence, they deserve to be compensated for it. That's clear. That's in the Constitution.
Jimmy, is there a half-pregnant answer here where maybe you say, where it's clear if you're working in a meat processing plant, they put in no guidelines, they don't observe the guidelines, and somebody gets sick, okay. But if, let's say you take a plane, the guidelines from the government are you got to have the middle seat open. They do it, people wear masks, people then say I got sick later on. Do you risk grounding the airline industry altogether here if you can have litigious basic recourse in the face of a pandemic?
We're mixing apples and oranges here. Look, if you want to get on a plane and the airline is conforming with the restrictions that are imposed, I'm sure that there can be some kind of waiver contingencies in there. I mean, you're getting on the plane, they're conforming with the standards, you're taking the risk that when you get on that plane, you may catch it. The issue with employers, I do think that there is kind of a middle ground here. There's the issue of the employees who say, look, I don't want to come back to work, because I'm scared that I might catch it or something like that. And at that point, I think it's reasonable for the employer to say, look, I need employees, I need to run my business. And the employer can't force the person to go back. But there does come a point where the employer says, look, I'm going to fill your position with somebody that is willing to come in, willing to work with full knowledge of whatever risks are out there.
Mayo, how much of this is attorneys, and I see this in other walks of life, even in pro sports, where teams are like, listen, we're losing money hand over fist here, come back not only at a reduced price here, but also sign a waiver. If people thought that this was basically a limited window, okay, I'll sign up for that for 6 months, but not beyond. How concerned people are this becomes a slippery slope, to Doug's point, that this isn't just for COVID, this goes way beyond that?
I think Doug hit it right on the head. I mean, even in the best of times, industry is always looking for a way to limit or to do away with their liability. And when you stop and think about it, we already have all of the things that Jim was discussing. When you walk into a restaurant or a store, you already assume that they've taken basic steps to make sure that you're not exposed to hazards. And if they've done that, then generally they're going to be all right. Now, yes, can you bring a lawsuit? Sure you can, but it's very difficult to find a lawyer who's going to take a lawsuit that doesn't have a lot of merit.
All right, guys, stay with me. When we come back, usually when you hear about a citizen's arrest, it's on a cop show or in some movie. But in Georgia, it is allowed by law, and it's actually playing a part in the murder of an unarmed black jogger. After the break, we'll explain it.